old friends, and new acquaintances. It is my great pleasure to welcome you all this evening to the FNVA Talks, organized by the Foundation for Nonviolent Alternatives. We are gathered here for what promises to be an intellectually stimulating and deeply relevant discussion on the Chinese perspective on His Holiness the Dalai Lama and India, politics in Zhongnanhai, led by the distinguished Dr. Ming Xia. Let me begin by extending a warm welcome to everyone present, our respected trustees, scholars, members of the diplomatic community, media representatives, and all those who have traveled from near and far to join us, especially in this inclement weather. So thank you very much indeed for being here. It is heartening to see so many familiar faces as well as new ones, united by a shared commitment to understanding the complex dynamics of our region. The topic that we are addressing today could not be more timely or significant. The intricate relationship between China, India, and Tibet sits at the heart of Asian geopolitics. The perspectives emanating from Zhongnanhai, the epicenter of Chinese political power, shaped not only China's internal policies, but also its approach towards its neighbors and the wider world. Understanding these perspectives is crucial for policymakers, scholars, and all those invested in peace and stability in Asia. We are honored to have Dr. Ming Xia with us, a renowned professor of political science at the City University of New York and an authority on Chinese politics. Dr. Xia brings not only academic rigor, but also personal experience to this discussion. He has only returned this morning from Dharamshala, where he participated in the 90th birthday celebrations of His Holiness the Dalai Lama, a momentous occasion that offered him a unique vantage point on the Sino-Tibet conflict and the spiritual leadership of His Holiness. Dr. Xia's reflections on that visit and his scholarly work offer us a rare window into how these issues are perceived within China and what they mean for India and the wider region. It is now my privilege to introduce the chair of this evening's session, Ambassador Shyam Saran. Ambassador Saran is not only a distinguished former Foreign Secretary of India and a leading voice in Indian strategic affairs, but also a trustee of the Foundation for Nonviolent Alternatives. His career has been marked by a deep engagement with China, Tibet, and the Himalayan region, and his insights have shaped India's foreign policy at the highest level. Ambassador Saran's stewardship of this discussion ensures that we will benefit from both depth and balance as we explore these sensitive and consequential issues. On behalf of FNVA, I thank you all for your presence and your commitment to dialogue and understanding. Let us use this evening to engage openly, learn from each other, and contribute to the ongoing quest for peace and stability in our region. With that, I invite Ambassador Shyam Saran to take the chair and guide us through these important conversations. Thank you.
Thank you very much, Shri Tandon. And I would like to thank the FNVA of which, of course, I'm a trustee, so I shouldn't be thanking them. But thank you very much for arranging this what promises to be a very, very interesting interaction this evening. Dr. Ming Xia, ni hao, and huan ni.
Thank you.
So, welcome to Professor Ming Xia. And I see from his bio that not only has he studied in China, in Fudan University, but he has also had a number of contacts with the Tibetan community here in India, but also His Holiness the Dalai Lama. So perhaps you have an insight into the dynamics between China and the Tibetan community here, particularly His Holiness, that many of us perhaps do not have. Let me just say that, as mentioned by Shri Tandon, that this is a particularly opportune time for you to come here and share your perspectives with us, because we have had a very major announcement by His Holiness concerning the reincarnation of the 15th Dalai Lama. And that, of course, is a complicating factor now in India-China relations. It is perhaps not appreciated that India-China relations actually really started deteriorating thanks to the Tibet revolt in 1959 and His Holiness coming and being given asylum in India. That is what turned the skirmishes which were taking place on the India-China border, which neither side regarded as very serious before 1959. They became a major security challenge in Chinese eyes. Even though it may not have been the intention on the part of India to intervene in any manner in the Tibet issue, the fact is that the fact that India gave shelter to His Holiness, that His Holiness was able to make statements concerning his position while he was in India, all this created the impression in China that India was somehow wedded to a policy of, subverting Chinese rule in Tibet. And I think that particular perception has remained very much alive all these years. I just want to mention one particular, series of conversations that I have had outside government with Chinese interlocutors. This was several years ago. I put across the view that a real improvement in China-India relations and a re-establishment of trust between them was something which was very much tied to our ability to somehow or the other manage the Tibet issue, to bring about some kind of a resolution to this issue. I conveyed to my Chinese interlocutors that they somehow had the perception that their problems with regard to Tibet would end once His Holiness was no longer alive. That with the passing away of His Holiness, the Tibet issue would resolve itself. My view was that actually the passing away of His Holiness without any kind of reconciliation between the Chinese side and the Tibetan side would actually make the issue more complicated. The reason why I said that was that the kind of militancy which has been developing amongst the younger people in the Tibetan community, this is something which it is His Holiness's, the reverence with which he is held, the kind of great influence that he has over the Tibetan community, not only here but on the other side of the border, that plays a very, very moderating role. And when that moderating role is not there, perhaps the issues will become even more difficult to solve. And therefore, it made sense for our Chinese friends to really seriously look at how perhaps some reconciliation process could be done. Now, you have met in the past His Holiness. During the last few years, I know for a fact that there have been, emissaries, informal emissaries from the Chinese side who have established contact with His Holiness. His Holiness at a certain point of time was very encouraged that under President Xi Jinping, there could perhaps be some movement towards that reconciliation. You are perhaps aware that there were proposals for His Holiness to perhaps visit Hong Kong. There was a Chinese party journal which in fact suggested that it would be better for China to re-engage with His Holiness and perhaps come to Hong Kong to give some religious, discourse. Perhaps he could even go for a pilgrimage to some of the famous pilgrimage places in China, like Wutai-shan, which is the seat of Maitri in Tibet, in China, and that at a future point of time he could even go to Tibet. So there were strong voices in China itself who were suggesting a different line. But in fact, this changed. As you know, a white paper was published by the Chinese government on Tibet, and that completely reversed any possibility of there being a reconciliation. So since then, actually this issue has been just lying dormant in a sense. But of course, I think things will start once again hotting up because of the statement made by His Holiness. And I'm a little apprehensive about the future, because I have seen that thanks to social media, thanks to there being ability to actually cross the Great Wall, it has been clear to me that there is a lot of contact taking place between Tibetans in Tibet and Tibetans here. There is a constant flow of communication taking place. So it's not as if they are completely insulated with what is happening here, or the people here are insulated from what is happening in Tibet. So how this is handled in the coming days will be very, very critical in terms of, our ability to manage the India-China relationship. So I'm very happy that we have you, Professor Ming Xia, speaking to us, because you are very familiar, of course, of the situation in China and the thinking in China. But at the same time, you have had, engagement with His Holiness and the Tibetan community here. So you have a very unique perspective, and we would very much profit from what you have to say. So without any further ado, your floor is yours.
Thank you. Thank you so much for inviting me, and also thank FNVA and for sponsoring this event. And even this is my 10th trip to India, but I have not been engaged with the think tanks and also researchers in New Delhi. So this is really exciting for me, and also I think it's a really good beginning for me to deepen my understanding of India. And today, the topic was given to me by our Dalai Lama's Chinese liaison officer, Zhongnanhai, right? Chinese perspective on His Holiness the Dalai Lama and India politics in Zhongnanhai. Yeah, one important thing is because this topic was given to me after I already came to India. And because I came to India, I know this monsoon season, this is my first time to be in India during monsoon season. So I try to pack light because I know I would climb up and down in Dalai Saran. So this is how I did not bring shoes, right, and tie and shoes, right. But I realized there was an event, and especially His Honorable Ambassador Saran is going to chair it, and I started panicking. I said I must get my clothes proper. So this afternoon I went to get my dress, get my tie, get my pants. So this, thank you so much for chairing this event. And one big thing is if we put China, India, and Tibet together, it is really beyond the comprehension of any secular person, because China is huge, right? And India is huge. And then Tibet, and is not as huge as China and India, but Tibet and is rooted in Buddhism, and Buddhism is rooted in Hinduism. So this is how, and for me, and I admire India for a long, long time. And when I was reading Tagore, I was always fascinated, and when I was in college. So I entered college at the age of 16. So from then on, for the past, 44 years, so I have been in international politics. But I never had this guts to say, I want to step into India to understand India, because I was intimidated. Until in the year 2008, and because I carried out my last field research in China, and this is on Sichuan earthquake. So before I came here, I just finished my book manuscript. The title is China and the Epicenter, Natural Calamity, Social Protests, and a Sadistic State. So after I finished my research trip, I was ousted by the Chinese authority. So since then on, I have never been able to go back to China. So you're going to ask, so if you cannot go back to China, so how can you understand China? How can you know China? Right? So I want to share with you is as a political scientist. Of course, when we think about politics, we always think about David Easton, right, and Gabriel Armand, right, and Paul, right, and their framework, inputs, process, and outputs, feedback. And so I always have been struggling with this impossibility. That means if I want to keep my access open to me, I have to compromise. I have to have some kind of self-censorship, and in order to be able to keep my bridge, right, and so I can go back to China. But then the Chinese, you can find, and the Chinese authority, especially my former colleague, my former teacher, and my former supervisor, because when Wang Hunin now, and he is sitting as the fourth in command in Chinese Communist apparatus, right? So when he was a graduate student, I was an undergraduate student, and when he became, a young assistant professor, and he taught my Western political thought. When he became a young, assistant professor, then I was in my MA program. So later, I also joined the faculty of the international politics at Fudan University. So we were colleagues. Later, he became a department chair. Later, of course, after 1989 Tiananmen massacre, I said that country was not for me anymore. I decided to say goodbye to China. So I left China and for the United States. But I always think about my teacher, Wang Hunin, and he treated me very well, and in a way, and he always wanted to recruit me to be part of his, prodigies, right? But I thought, and I could not agree with him on several issues. But I think I understand his cultural pattern and his psychological pattern. Therefore, today, if we talk about the Zhongnanhai perspective, probably I can make some suggestions. Yeah, but when I left China in 2008, that was my last trip, I realized suddenly I become free, because I did not care about whether whatever I say, whatever I write would offend the Chinese government. Therefore, the self-censorship was completely gone. So this is really what I think. This is what the Heart Sutra, right, teaches us. When you base your heart in nowhere, so you become courageous, right? You can escape from all kinds of delusions. So this is why I want to say yes. And I lost my access to China, but I think I got my independence and my free thinking. Therefore, and I believe, and my understanding of China has been deepened, has become better, not has become lousy. So this is what I want to say. And when I was thinking about China closed the door to me, so what I'm going to do? And I'm not, a person who wants to have early retirement. That was when I already got promotion to full professor. So I said, okay, I don't care about anything anymore. So now it's time for me to plunge into India. And so I said, even I fail, I don't speak Hindi, but it's going to give me the opportunity. I'm going to understand another great civilization. So this is how since 2010, until today, I have made 10 trips to India. And so my first passport, right, I had a 10-year visa. Now, and India has abolished a 10-year visa, but I still have the 5-year visa. So you can understand, I am one of the Chinese and who can claim, and I try to hold India and China together. I am struggling. But also I can claim I'm more Indian than Chinese. I'm more American than Chinese because now I have lived in U.S. much longer than my stay in China. I left China at the age 26. Right? So, okay. So now I wanted to share with you. When I was in Dharamsala, I was with His Holiness, and I have met His Holiness more than 20 times. And I also hosted 2 forums at the City University of New York on behalf of His Holiness. But this trip, it was extremely important for me because in the history of Tibet, and in the history of Dharamsala, in the history of Dalai Lamas, there has never been such kind of event, right, to celebrate Dalai Lama's 90th birthday. So this is what I feel is historically unprecedented. So this is why I always want to be part of it, to witness history. And one important thing for me, very special was, when I met His Holiness, and His Holiness gave me his book with his autograph, right? And so when I presented my book, and because I dedicate 2 books of mine to His Holiness, and because His Holiness always told me, write in Chinese. I want you to write and to tell my Chinese brothers and sisters about my policy, about my ideas. So this is why, and my academic life, to some extent, took a detour. Because for me, if I work in American institution, and basically if I wrote more in Chinese, that would not, you see, strengthen my position, right? But I said, anyway, I got full professor already, so who cares, right? But this time, the important thing is, as I said, because Buddhism is deeply rooted in Hindu tradition, and especially His Holiness talked about Nalanda tradition. And so when I started my understanding of India, and people said, you must start with reading Gita and the Upanishads. And so this is how, when I read Upanishads, and so the title means you sit respectfully beside the feet of your teacher. So this time, when I got the opportunity and I could have a picture with His Holiness, I was sitting right beside his feet. And so this is what I feel it has special meaning for me, because as a student of His Holiness, I really feel, and this special moment, I have not only met His Holiness, and also I have fulfilled my dream, and especially from Indian Holy Script and Upanishads. Right? So this is what I want to share this with you. Now I want to talk about Indian, China, Tibet, right, and what a total mess, right? And so where should I start? And I want to say, when we talk about His Holiness, right, and India, and of course the Chinese, they are very mad at His Holiness, very mad at India. So you understand, India and China are separated by the Himalayan range, right? And so one important thing is, actually, there is no Indian reporter stationed in China at this moment.
There is.
There is?
There is a PTI correspondent.
Really? Because my last information is there was no accreditation for Chinese reporters to stay in India, and there was no accreditation for Indian reporter to be stationed in China. So this is how you can find these 2 superpowers, right? And the most populous countries in the world, India, in the last year just surpassed China to become the most populous country. But these 2 countries, the gap and the misunderstanding, right, between them, I think have been deepened, not lessened, right? So this is what I feel and is important. And if China, you see, is mad, and His Holiness are mad, and India, and we often said people are mad at you, actually it's not your fault, right? It's something wrong with the person who is mad at you. So in Buddhism, we talk about greed, right? We talk about delusion, and we talk about anger and all this. So here I want to say China, why China is mad, and His Holiness, why China is mad, and India, why China actually is mad, and the whole world, right? And so I want to look at, from the perspectives of the Chinese leaders, how they assess the global political economy, and how they assess the current state of Chinese political economy. Therefore, and they can, you see, situate and India and His Holiness, right, into their cognitive landscape. So this is where I want to start. As I said, I'm very pessimistic about the current state of global political economy, and I think we are already in the Third World War. Right? I believe a Third World War has already started. Why I say that? Because the first thing is Russia, right, the old superpower, in military coalition with North Korea, and they are fighting in Ukraine. And Ukraine, of course, is supported by European Union, also by Americans. So this is a proxy war, right, and with the superpowers behind. So I don't want to elaborate on it. But if we imagine if Ukrainian war is over, and if North Korea wants to attack South Korea, Russia is going to get involved, right? Because they got the deal, right? And you help me fight, and now, and so in the future, I will help you fight. So this, I think, is very dangerous. And so this former superpower. And then the sitting superpower, the United States. And the United States and Israel, right? And it's a proxy power in Middle East. And they are bombing in Gaza. They are killing a lot of people there. And also, they bombed Iran and bombed Tehran. And so I think that's ridiculous. And that can show the stupidity of the major decision makers in American politics. Because why? Because when one leader would say, okay, I bombed you, I sent 3 big bombers, right, to destroy your facilities, then I will say, okay, now it's over. Now we can sit down to talk. I think that's ridiculous because that's childish. Because it's completely destroyed the fundamental principle of reciprocity in international politics. If I already punched you 3 times, now you just tell them, come down, let's talk. I think that's ridiculous. Yeah, because I think your bombing has already justified that Iran can kill Americans, right, to retaliate. But you cannot say, okay, now come down and we can sit down. So this, I think, is very, very dangerous. The sitting superpower is destroying the current global order. This global order was created by the United States with the West, but the United States is creating it. Therefore, we are entering the global disorder. We don't have global order anymore. One more I want to emphasize, Iran is a member of the Shanghai Cooperation Organization, right? And India is now also an observer, right? And a member, a former member. Yeah.
We are a member.
Okay, good. So that's to say, if you look at and in terms of Euro-Asian and this regional security and the coalition, but the United States could just say, okay, I just bomb one is a Shanghai Cooperation Organization member. I don't care. So how did you see China and Russia? They think about, right? If we try to work together to create regional security, but then Trump doesn't care. Trump can, have this insult to everybody, right? I don't care. Right? So this, I think, is very, very dangerous, right? And now we come to India. India now is the most populous country, and Pakistan is also top 10 most populous country. But we know for the past months, right, the 2 countries, they were shooting each other with missiles. They were shutting down each other's airplanes, right? And so this, I think, is also very dangerous because 2 nuclear powers, and they are in such a heated conflict. So this is what I think is very dangerous for us to say the most populous country and also the economic dynamo today in today's global political economy and is in such a great danger. And of course, and we know, and India and China, sometimes they're going to have this flare up in the border area, right? And so you never know when suddenly and the Indian soldiers, Chinese soldiers, they're going to have scuffles, they're going to kill some soldiers, right? So this is what I feel, and it is very dangerous. So now we come to China. China, of course, is observing what's going on. What China wants. Actually, Xi Jinping has emphasized 3 important days, 3 important years. One is 2027, another is 2035, then another one is 2049. Why do these 3 years have significance for Xi Jinping's thinking or for Chinese policy? Because 2027, that will be the 100 years anniversary of the founding of the People's Liberation Army. And so now they are talking about the historic mission the army wants to accomplish. So I tried to read what is their historic mission. And actually in New York, and I gathered an aid, you see, and also very knowledgeable thinkers. We had a closed door conversation. So the transcript already had been published in Chinese and on China and Policy Review and based in New York. So basically, our reading is actually 2027. That will be the Xi Jinping's term, third term to expire. So in the fall, and he would seek for the fourth term. And so in order to justify, and he's in the office for life, right, his power for life, and he must convince his colleagues that I am a great unifier. So this is how we believe from now on to 2027, that was the most dangerous moment and for China to attack Taiwan. And then China to attack Taiwan and depends on several factors, and to make the expectation and into a reality. And I think one major factor is the factor of U.S. And if the United States can convince China, right, don't do it. If you do it, you're going to pay a high price. Probably we're going to send our troops, right, and to go there. But I can tell you, under President Trump, there is no such credibility. No one, at least I would not think Trump would send American soldiers to die, to fight on behalf of Taiwan against China. I don't know, probably some of you think Trump would send soldiers there to die. I don't. And especially if you look at Trump organized his great parade, you can see how the soldiers, they were making their protest and possible allowed by the martial, the court of law. And because for soldiers, if you watch American, the marching bands, or even watch high school, American students are not well disciplined. But if you watch the high school marching band, right, they can walk in unison, right? But then you can look at American soldiers. If we have served in the army, we know. And if we have some discipline, automatically we are going to be in unison, right? And when you move your right leg, I move my right leg, right? So we coordinate. But it's extremely difficult for the professional soldiers, also the elite, an army, and to work in a way when you are moving your right leg, I'm moving my left leg, right? That's not easy. So this is how I think that was the contempt for the authority of Trump. So this is how I don't think an American army is in such high morale and to get involved in foreign adventure. And so also another important thing is because Trump let Hong Kong go. And Hong Kong used to be the third largest financial center in the world, but Trump did not care. Trump said, okay, I don't care. Every country has a human rights issue, so China is deal with it, and on their own terms, I don't care. And so if you read Bolton's memoir, and so he said once Trump sat in front of his resolute desk, and he was playing with his pen and Sharpie, and he said, China is like this big desk. What is Taiwan? Taiwan is just like Sharpie. So this is his understanding of Taiwan. So my understanding of Trump is, and he is a brick and mortar builder, but he has no understanding of international trade and international finance. Why I say so? Because when he said, I'm going to impose tariff, right, 20%, 50%, whatever, 100%, okay. But the global total trade before the pandemic was only $20 trillion. Okay, if you tax the global trade, all they are yours, right? Of course, the United States cannot control more than 20% of the global trade, right? And so if you tax all of them, probably several thousand $billion, right? But every day, the daily trading for foreign currency is more than $6 trillion. So Trump could make American currency lose its value. That is by trillions, right? And Trump could send a tweet to cause the stock market crash from Tokyo, right? And to Hong Kong, to China, and to Europe, and to New York stock market, right? And so that's always trillions and trillions of dollars. They evaporate. So this is how I think in Trump's cognitive thinking and idea, he has no capability to understand how today global trade is more important than your real goods and manufacturing, and then your building of houses. And then global finance, and is more important than your foreign trade. but he has no idea about that. So this is why I'm very disappointed as, you see, a professor in international political economy, right? So this is what I think, and for China, Trump has no credibility. Trump has no, you see, credibility to threaten China and to deter China. So I think that is most dangerous. So this is what I say, and World War III has already started, but we have not seen nothing yet. And because the worst scenario could come if China decided to start their move across Taiwan Strait. And because China, you see, for the past 40 years, because its military spending has always increased by double digits, and always, you see, faster than their GDP growth. Therefore, in Chinese, we talk about, oh, the Chinese, they are like, you see, throw dumplings and in their work, and in building warships, right, and the nuclear submarines and aircraft carriers and all this kind of stuff. Because my father-in-law was the leading nuclear submarine and aircraft carrier architect for China. And he has designed, calculated the first formula for Chinese nuclear submarine, and he led the first experiment. He got his doctorate degree from Leningrad Shipping Institute. Therefore, and a lot of his technology, they are from Russia, from the Soviet Union, right? But what I here want to say is the Chinese are very, very, you see, much aware. We cannot to spend as much as we have already spent during the past 30 years for the future military build-up. They don't have the financial resources. Therefore, if they do not use it, and probably all these weapons are going to be, you see, outdated, they're going to be in rust, so China would not have another opportunity to really fight a war which the Americans probably would not be able to defeat China. So this is what I think is very, very dangerous, right? So, and I believe, World War III has started, but I'm afraid, and when China start to move, when North Korea, they're going to start to move, when Japan also would think about, you see, their, you see, policy choices, it will be really a cauldron for in the Pacific. So this is why I'm very pessimistic, right? But of course, I'm going to give some, you see, hopes, right? Why we can find opportunities. And I don't know how much time you gave to me.
No, you can speak for another 15, 20 minutes.
Okay.
The last 15 minutes we'll have questions.
Okay, because now it's 6:55.
So another 15 minutes.
Okay, yeah. So I'm going to finish around, you see, in the 7, 10, yeah, 7. Okay, so now I want to mention the current state of political economy in China is not good. And of course, because I came here, I just finished a book manuscript. The title is Interpreting the China Dream. I was mocking the China Dream. So the subtitle is Institutional Entropy and Delusional Politics. So in this book, I have several observations. I just share some of my observations. One is, and if you look at the Chinese national balance sheet in the year 2024, and the Chinese local, you see, the interest payment for Chinese local government debt, interest payment for local government debt, and in 2024 reached 1,2612 billion dollars. Right, so imagine that, put it in the context. And because in the same year, the Chinese National People's Congress is authorized local governments and to issue bonds, right, to transfer their so-called debts into bonds. But the quota for them to issue local bonds is only about 1 trillion. So it means now they can barely, you see, use the new issuance of bonds to cover their interest rate payment. So this is what Chinese economy, we said, stupid economy. And the Chinese economy is making a very difficult situation for Xi Jinping to face. So now I want to explain to you, you can find, I call it, there are 5 Alibaba caves. They have close to China. We read this in the Arabian stories, 1,000 Wang, right, and Nice, right, and so there's Alibaba, right, and so this is Ma Yun and Jack Ma, and he got this inspiration Alibaba, and so Alibaba and would use in the use the code, right, sesame open, right, and so he could get treasure. And so China, of course, for the past 40 years, they got several Alibaba caves. But now they have all closed. Number one cave is land revenue and real estate. And so if you look at how China use monetization, financialization, so the China's development bank all use the land resources and their collateral, therefore, to fund and their projects. Right? So this is number one. And so if you have heard Evergreen, Wanda, and the Country Garden, and they have become bankrupt, they have been, in deep debt crisis, you understand what's going on, right? So I don't want to elaborate on them. The second, especially in India, so we can understand this very easily, and the demographic dividend has gone, right? And so for China, the labor force, right, is shrinking, and so the population is aging. And so at the end of this century, China is half its population. So China now is the country, the only country with the old people. We talk about age 65 and above, and with more than 100 million. China is the only country with such a huge an old population. So we talk about the Louis turning point has happened to China, and so because China had this brutal one family, one child family planning policy, so they destroyed the population structure. So if we look at India, India does not have such kind of problem, and India, but already, and the fertility rate already is hovering around 2 point some. Right. So this means the Indian population is stabilizing, is going to maintain constant. So this is a great advantage for India, but China is in a crisis. The third, the exorbitant use of seniorage, and we issue fiat money. So China, for the past 40 years, they have abused this privilege to issue a lot of paper money, and so without taxation, right? So they could steal wealth from the Chinese people. So when they issue a tremendous amount of money, and of course when the economy is doing very well, and of course there is the interest rate for saving is lower than the inflation rate, so the Chinese government could use this trick, right, to always and steal from the Chinese people and then to finance their projects. But I want you to be aware, and today the M2 over GDP ratio has become unsustainable. And so I don't want to elaborate, but if you Google M2 over GDP, you can find the only country which is higher is Lebanon. But Lebanon already bankrupted itself. And so another country is Japan. But one thing I want you to be aware is Japan has, an equivalent of, the global investment positioning in the world equivalent to their GDP. So therefore, Japan issued money and to some extent to cover their foreign currency earnings and from overseas investment. But China, and especially if you include Hong Kong M2 over GDP ratio has reached more than, somewhere 400, and Macau somewhere more than 200, and so China more than 200 some. So I calculate, put all of them together. So my fuzzy memory is somewhere about 220%. But in India, it's less than 100%. In the US, it's 99%. So you can find China has made their renminbi and crazy, right? So this is a major disaster for China to handle. And then, of course, household saving. And so for the Chinese, and once in a time, the Chinese household saving reached 80% of their GDP. But today it's less than 40%. But of course, China still has high household saving because Chinese, they face uncertainty in welfare, especially the aging population, especially the rising costs in housing and education. So the Chinese, they are saving a lot. But the problem is when they are saving a lot, it hurts their consumption. So when Xi Jinping is thinking about how he tried to use internal consumption to drive Chinese economy forward, because the Chinese economy was pulled forward by, we call a troika, right? And the investment, right? And also exports, right? And internal consumption. But now, because exports, they have crisis, and the investments, they have become unsustainable. So this is why they want to increase domestic consumption, but now they got this bottleneck. And so if you look at the Chinese families, and they are heavily burdened. In my family alone, and my family with 4 siblings, we are not from a humble and poor family. We were from in the upper middle class. But I can tell you, 4 siblings of mine, and 2 is the older brother, older sister. They stay in China, but 2 younger ones, younger sister, and myself, we are in the United States. And the people in China, they are bankrupt. And so they are in debt, right? So they always beg us and to bail them out. But people in the United States, we are thriving, right? So not only we are thriving, our next generation and is thriving too. So I just want you to be aware. And in China, and so they have a big problem. And so this means the Chinese government, because they used to monopolize the savings, because the state banks, they always use Chinese people's savings as, you see, an investment for their SOEs without paying any interest rate. This is what I think the good time, right, is over. And so now, the last part we know, when Trump imposed high tariffs, so Chinese exports, not only to the US, but also to the West, right, have met these high tariffs. And so I think in China, you can find 5 Alibaba caves, and China enjoyed for a long time. And also they contributed to China's miracle. They all have closed, right? So now I wanted to explain how Xi Jinping look at the current situation. And because now it's 7:04. I have somewhere about 10 minutes, right? So if I were Xi Jinping, I look at this, right, I would be, you see, concerned. And I think Xi Jinping actually, when I read his 4 volumes of, say, governance and on governance, right, I can see how Xi Jinping is trembling in front of every day, and in front of the calendar. Look at every day. There is a black swan. There was a gray rhino, and there was, you say, that is a crisis or this crisis, and so. And Xi Jinping, you can find under his leadership, so he has promoted a great propaganda campaign, right, to try to polish China's image and to sustain the confidence from Wall Street in China, right? And so then China has developed their so-called new comprehensive concept of security, and they try to see look at every possibility that they would find a crisis. And so no matter an ecological aspect or financial aspect, if you look at recently, Xi Jinping has organized 16 super commissions. So if you look at the titles of all these super commissions, even they are chaotic, they are overlapping, but you can understand what are nightmares on Xi Jinping's mind, right? So I hope, because on July 1st, they publish, you see, how they decide to create a central coordinating commission and to supervise all these 16 commissions. Then all these 16 commissions are going to supervise all the bureaucratic establishment, that means the State Council, right? So Xi Jinping, and he's facing a lot of challenges, but he's using Mao Zedong's, you see, old, which has been proved, you see, and invalid, right, and counterproductive, but he tried to save China, to try to get China out of the, is in the paradox. So this is what I think is a problem. But of course, and Wang Hunin, as the man in charge of the United Front work, and he proposed the so-called Great United Front work, this concept, in the 3rd plenum of the 20th Party Congress in their communique. And so I can say, and Xi Jinping and Wang Hunin, by the way, Wang Hunin used to be my teacher and my colleague, and also my supervisor, and so I because many of his friends are also my friends. Many of his students are my classmates, right? Many of his teachers are my teachers. Therefore, we share some information. Based upon my understanding, Wang Hunin married and he divorced his wife, and then he lived with his lover for a while, and then he married and a family relative from Penyuan. Right, so to some extent, we can find Wang Hunin not only is a member of the so-called Shanghai gang, right, gang of Shanghai, but actually he is a member of the inner court, right? So we talk about in India or in China, we talk about, yeah, you are part of the family, right, of the emperor. So Wang Huning is included into the family of Xi Jinping. Therefore, Wang Huning's position has been consolidated. This is why, and when he is in charge of the United Front work, he proposed a great United Front work concept. But that means for Tibetans, for overseas Chinese, and for a lot of people, that will be more difficult for people to deal with. And so Xi Jinping is aware of all kinds of crises. So now he's pushing his leaders, officials, and said, you must to be, in the problem or crisis driven. Then, reflects Xi Jinping's, panicking mentality. Because today, and he basically is treating his government, his super commissions as a firefighter squad, right? And the firefighting squad now, they don't have the, leisure and the relaxed mindset to think about long-term strategy, plan, and this or that. But now they are focusing on crisis, problems. And so it means, and all crisis and problems, they are overwhelming them. So this is what I think is interesting. So if we look at domestic, especially the Chinese, young people, their unemployment rate has reached more than 25%. Young people, right? And so, and college, and graduates, they face unemployment. Their salary is very low. Starting salary is somewhere about 3,000 Chinese yuan. And Li Keqiang said, even in a medium-sized, city, even that's not enough for you to rent an apartment. So this is why. And when the so-called blank paper movement started, they started, and basically by the young people in urban centers on campuses. And also the interesting thing is, when they decide to raise a piece of blank paper, and we know this is the so-called shilling point phenomenon. Because I don't tell you anything, I just raise this blank paper there, you understand what I want to say. And everybody and have this consensus, I know what you want to say. You also know what I want to say. That is our common enemy is Xi Jinping. Right? The problem comes from Xi Jinping. So Xi Jinping has become the shilling point. Without communication, we know, and he is a deep trouble for Chinese political economy. So that's something I think the domestic crisis. And of course, frontier crisis, right? Tibet is part of the frontier crisis. And then foreign crisis. And Trump, as I said, I have been very critical about Trump. But I have to be, very careful to say, in every piece of dark clouds, we always can say is a silver lining, right? And Trump, of course, and he is messing up everything. And he's destroying the global leadership of the United States. He's destroying the Western democratic coalition. He's destroying NATO. But one thing is interesting, because democracy always is a governance to deal with crisis. So for the past 2,000 years, right, since Aristotle until today, we know democracy, I call it political Venus. It's not perfect, but it's the beauty of all political, politics. So democracy, and when we face, the stress test, today the whole world is put under a stress test, right, from the pandemic until today, and which system is going to survive better? The pandemic has proved, and the democratic countries survive better. So I'm sure, and at this moment, we have all the four nights, right, and the dark nights, they have come out. Pandemic, war, right, and flood, right, earthquake, right, and probably, I'm thinking about other disasters, right, a plague, right. So my understanding is eventually democracy is more resilient, but totalitarian system is more brittle, and therefore I think this kind of stress test to some extent is going to make democracy better, but eventually can shake and up, and can to some extent loosen the totalitarian system. But totalitarian system, once you started fragmentation, and most likely you don't have this resilience. So this is why I think China is getting into all these problems. Last point I want to say, when we look at Xi Jinping, many people say, oh, Xi Jinping was smart. Xi Jinping was very talented. He was powerful. Therefore, he reached the acme of Chinese power. I said, no, actually, it's completely wrong. And Xi Jinping reached the top because his political opponents, they were stupid. they were arrogant, and also they were corrupt. And because if you look at Bo Xilai, if he did not, you see, smash the face of Wang Lijun, if Bo Xilai's wife was not Wang Lijun's, you see, the sweetheart, and if Wang Lijun did not use Bo Xilai's wife to try to, you see, extort Bo Xilai, so Bo Xilai would say, you are using the woman who loves you to extort me. So a smash, right, a slap on his face. And then Wang Lijun escaped to the U.S. Embassy. So all this, they are by accident. And so they caused this chain reaction in Chinese politics, the downfall of Bo Xilai. And then many opportunities were created and for Xi Jinping. Second, if we know Lin Jihua was also the chief of staff for Hu Jintao. And if his son was not, you see, driving a Ferrari on the highway of Beijing and did not kill himself, and with 2 Tibetan young women in the car and also naked, right, and create a lot of, you see, rumors. But based upon my understanding, and he was delivering 2 young Tibetan women to Zhou Yongkang. Zhou Yongkang is, the Chinese leaders, why I talk about sadistic state? Because they are sadistic. And the sadism is very strong, especially sexual sadism against young women. And because Zhou Yongkang, of course, and he is in the hand, you see, in the prostitutes from Russia, from Ukraine, all this. But he said, I'm a bumpkin. I don't, you see, like foreign, you see, the food or foreign, this, I don't understand. But I like exotic, but something which I feel closer. So Tibetan young woman, and can speak Chinese, right? And from the high up is in the Lama, and one is a bureau director of public security in Qinghai, right? So they were exotic enough, but they were Chinese enough, right? And to please Zhou Yongkang. But in the middle of night, and around 2 or 3 o'clock, Zhou Yongkang could not sleep, and they gave a phone call to Linggu, the son of Lin Jihua. Said, okay, deliver, right, to me. So Linggu, and he was already drunken as he tried to drive, right, and to deliver. So they saw the car crash happen. And then Lin Jihua controlled the accent side and said, don't put the real name of the victim, right, and put a fake name. But then the police officer said, okay, fake name, Jia name. Jia in Chinese it means fake. But then there was number 4, you see, the Politburo member sitting right in the Politburo. His name is Jia Qinlin. So suddenly rumors started and said, oh, Jia Qinlin's son, you see, and the words is with woman naked and the car crash. Jia Qinlin feel wrong. And he said, no, it had nothing to do with me. I have no son, I have only one daughter. So Jia Qinlin complained to Jiang Zemin. Jiang Zemin did not know Lin Jihua already lost his son, but he never announced this news. So Jiang Zemin, of course, was very mad. And so Lin Jihua was a protege for Hu Jintao. Hu Jintao not only lost credibility, but of course lost his power in being the kingmaker, right, for the future lineup of Chinese leadership. So this is another stupid, you see, blunder, right? And the Taliban once said, and blunder, that's even worse than crime. Why? Because it hurts yourself, right? And so you can find here. And of course, if we look at Li Keqiang and look at Liu Yuanchao and Lin Jihua, they were undercutting Li Keqiang. And even the Chinese Communist Youth League, right, was most powerful. But eventually, in every straw poll, and you can find Xi Jinping always, you see, was ahead of Li Keqiang. Why? Because Li Keqiang's position was undercut by Li Yuanchao and Lin Jihua. Both of them, they want to be the, you see, future successor. So what I mean is, if we look at Zhongnanhai, and we should not overestimate their capability, because in the West, China study specialists always think, oh, China and is too big to fail. No, you're wrong. And under the complex theory, China can fall tomorrow. I'm not going to be surprised. Many people say, oh, China is so, you see, invincible. Whatever the Chinese leader and the orders, all people, 1.4 billion Chinese are going to dance to the tune. Also, it's wrong, because and many Chinese officials now, they are the so-called lying flat, or they are running away. So China, there was a new term called wrongnology, and people are running away. So this is why Xi Jinping is also very frustrated. The leaders, the officials, they are not working hard. So this is what I want to say. And when we look at India and Tibet, they are a headache for China. Not because what's wrong with Dalai Lama, with India. It's exactly what India is doing good, and it makes China look bad. It's whatever Dalai Lama, especially the midway policy, is kicking the ball into the court of Zhongnanhai. But then the Beijing leaders, they have no way to solve this paradox and to make open statement, I oppose it or I adopt it. So this is what I want to say. I stop here.
Okay.